So I know this is not my usual sort of video, um, but I feel like YouTube has, in the past maybe few years, even become more of a search engine. Like people go to YouTube, they throw something in the search, they find a video about a thing or an idea, something they want to learn about. They watch said video and they leave. Back in the day, when I started YouTube, it was more of a thing where you were building a channel, you were building or kind of sharing your personality in hopes that people would follow you for your story. And it's definitely less of that nowadays. Back then, I think it was more important that you kind of stick to a niche and, create consistent content that is predictable for your audience. And for those of you, by the way, who are subscribers who have followed me for a long time, I do really appreciate that. I love you guys for it. I couldn't have built my first business without it. But I have allowed myself to feel some sort of like imaginary pressure to continue making content within the same niche for forever, um, just because I thought I was supposed to. As the nature of YouTube has changed quite a bit, I feel a little bit more free to kind of just make whatever. And that's what this video is going to be, is my first foray into whatever else. Now, because people feel weird discussing things like material wealth and possessions, I do want to offer a few disclaimers here. Number one, watches should not be considered investments. Even the ones that are quite rare or hard to come by, that you buy at retail and they appreciate over time, even those will not perform as well as the same amount of money put away in an index fund and compounded over the course of a few years. I hate to say it, but the math is the math. Two, no matter what anybody says, you don't need a watch. We all carry phones nowadays. Your phone tells time just fine, oftentimes more accurately than your watch will be able to. So if you're watching videos, if you hear it from your friends or just people online, whatever, if you don't care about watches, don't let anybody or anything convince you that you need a watch if you don't want one. And three, if you do get into watches, understand that nobody really cares. Nobody's going to be impressed by the amount of money you spent. Nobody cares about how accurate your Grand Seiko is. Nobody knows what a Geneva hallmark is. If you do get into this hobby, please be sure that it is for your own sake, by your own preference. And if you should happen to stumble upon some other like-minded nerds that you can share this with, and you guys can geek out over watches and all the little minutia, that's just icing on the cake. For me, whenever I watch videos about watches, I really wish that the people making the videos would tell more of the story as to how or why they acquired a certain watch and added it to their collection. I don't know if you're going to care about that, so if you don't, go ahead and skip this part. But I do want to share the story of why I bought this watch and what it means to me. So, rewinding back to 2017, I was neck deep in building what would end up being my biggest business. I was originally hired as a project manager, and after a stellar, incredible performance in my first contract, the CEO asked me to stay on as chief operating officer with the main task of bringing the business to a point of cash positivity. Because this industry was entirely new to me, and it's an industry where it's really hard to break out in, I constantly doubted myself and whether or not I'd actually be able to do what I set out to. Now, if we skip ahead in the story a bit to 2020, after negotiating a supply agreement, we basically arrived at that point of cash positivity. Around that same time, coming into my birthday, Christine, my now fiance, asked me what I wanted for my birthday. And I'd already been thinking about buying a watch for some time. I was watching videos all the time. We had on vacation recently seen a gray dial, blue bezel Seamaster. I remember trying that watch on and thinking to myself that I really did like it. It was at the time everything to me that I thought a really nice watch was supposed to be. It was just a bit too bright, a bit too flashy for me. And then around that time, Omega announced the green on green, green dial, green bezel Seamaster. And I knew when I saw the press photos and press videos that that was the perfect watch for me. So I asked her for my birthday if she could find somebody, find a boutique, find an AD that would sell me this watch. And she did. She called every single place she possibly could in California. Months later, I got a call from a local AD actually, who coincidentally would end up being the jeweler who made our engagement ring. We got the call, picked up my Seamaster, and essentially this watch had become, one, a celebration of a certain achievement in business that was really important to me at the time. And two, ever since then has been kind of a gentle reminder that A lot of the principles and character that I've had to build over the years to do all that I wanted to do in my life, business and otherwise, it carries over. So even if it was at first my first business, those same things carried me through in this next venture and the venture after that and so on, and in so many other places in my life outside of my work. So in a small way, every time I put on this watch, every time I wear it, every time I stare at it on my wrist, it's kind of reassurance that I am capable, far past my own estimation. Now, I want to spend some time kind of talking through the unboxing experience of this watch because in a world where currently even the highest end watches are doing away with proper presentation boxes, I am looking at you, Vacheron. Omega. Omega is still killing the game. Now, I get the whole save the earth thing, but for the price and the number of watches I'll own over the course of my lifetime, I would just really like to have the box. To me, the trend away from wooden or other nice presentation boxes seems much more like a cost-cutting measure under the guise of virtue than actual virtue. So Omega, their box here is, as far as I can tell, is solid wood. If it is like MDF or particle board that's been veneered, they've done a really great job because I can't tell. It's worth noting that they use different boxes in different generations. So the generation before this, they had a gloss lacquered box that looked otherwise identical. In this generation of Seamaster, they switched to this kind of satin lacquer. In other watches like their Speedmaster, they have this really kind of cool nylon box that looks more like a toolbox. And it's really nice that they actually put the time and effort into designing and making these pieces that are really, I mean, the only time you're really going to use it is when you are unboxing the watch, and it makes that moment feel that much more special. On the exterior of the box, you have this applied Omega logo. I believe they've been thoughtful enough to apply that before lacquering the box, which I can appreciate. On the front, you do have an actual metal push button that you need to press in order to open the box. And when you flip that open, the hinges are sprung such that when it's fully open, it stays open. It's not going to slam shut on you. Inside the box, top and bottom, it is lined in leather. Now, I don't know if this is real or fake. I don't know that I care because they've done it really well, but it does feel really nice. It's all padded and everything. The stitching is very clean. On the bottom side where you actually have your watch, we have this pillow that it does kind of adjust. Like you have this exterior sleeve that you can pull off if you have smaller wrists and you've sized your watch for it. You can put it on the pillow or take that sleeve off and put it on the pillow and still use this box. But one cool trick that they've done is if you lift up this section here, what you have underneath is now this sort of box where you can put your watch on its pillow into this box, close that guy up, and snap it shut. And now you have a nice little travel case. Really thoughtful design. I feel like this is everything that a presentation box should be. And I wish that more brands would take this part of the experience more seriously. Past the unboxing, what exactly are you getting with this Speedmaster? Pause for a moment and tell you that this is not going to be a spec rundown. I will, for now, throw this screenshot up of the tech data from Omega. If you want to pause now, do that. But there are hundreds, if not thousands of videos like that online. This is not that video. My opinion then of the design. This is a great modern iteration of a very capable dive watch that, within the context of the brand, is historically and culturally significant to Omega. This is sporty enough to be an everyday watch, decorated enough to be dressed up if needed. In this particular generation, you have a ceramic dial and ceramic bezel, which together, especially in this color combo, green on green, it's subtle, but so sharp, so clean, so satisfying. In my opinion, comparing this to some of the other generations, both previous and current, the depth and spacing of the waves on the dial are perfect, is exactly what it should be. Something I thought about when I was shopping for this watch and kind of comparing it to what else was on the market is that whenever I looked at a Rolex Submariner or a GMT Master 2, I always wish that Rolex did something with the dials. And I understand the appeal, but still, I feel like they could have done better with that, just adding something. Do you know why the Meteor, GMT, and Daytonas work so well? To me, it's because they have a little bit of something extra, just like the waves on this dial. Most often, this is going to appear very dark gray, if not black. Only in very bright sunlight can you actually tell that this is green. And when you do catch that sunlight, the green does really, really pop. But it's nice. It's almost like secretly green, but most often dark gray. Just as a side note, because I know they have since released another generation or an updated Seamaster, I feel that changing back to an aluminum bezel with the small wave dial and the domed crystal is a mistake. All of these changes make the watch cheaper to manufacture. And this is a matter of personal opinion, surely, but the sort of neo-vintage design features that you see on a lot of watches nowadays, to me, just feel sort of disingenuous. Why, if we have the capabilities, the technological advancements in manufacturing, why not make watches as good as we possibly can? This watch does wear every bit of its 42 millimeter diameter by 13.6 millimeter thickness. It's a substantial watch. You're never going to forget that it's on your wrist like you might with something lighter around the same size, perhaps like a titanium Grand Seiko. On my 7.25, or for you guys everywhere else in the world, 18.4 centimeter wrist, it's about as big of a watch as I'd like to wear. A good way to think about this is that I have owned this watch now for going on 6 years. I've never wanted this to be bigger, but I have occasionally wished it were a tiny bit smaller. The OEM tank track style bracelet that this reference came on is interesting. When I first got the watch, I didn't love it, but it's definitely grown on me. It looks somehow both rugged and elegant. I think it's the combination of, one, having a single width all the way through. It's 20 millimeters across and it's 20 millimeters all the way through to the clasp. There's no taper at all. I think that does make it look a little bit more rugged. Having these polished intermediary links does elevate it a touch. I will say the design of the bracelet, because it's been essentially the same for many, many generations prior, does make the watch look a bit older. But that's not necessarily a bad thing. I kind of like, in a way, that you can tell this is a Seamaster just by seeing the bracelet. The micro adjust at the clasp is great. You have plenty of space there. And I do use that on an almost daily basis when I'm wearing this. The dive extension, to me, is silly because nobody's going to use this watch to actually go diving. But I guess if they're going to have an external helium escape valve, they might as well go as far as having the dive extension as well, so we can pretend that this is a bona fide dive watch. Personally, though, I'd rather see them ditch the dive extension in exchange for a slimmer clasp that maintains the micro adjust. The brushed surfaces here are brushed in a way that is very soft. There's not a whole lot of shininess or luster to them. It's much more perhaps matte. And the contrast between that and the polished surfaces is very well balanced. I also have this OEM rubber strap, which is really nice that Omega offers their rubber straps in all of the colors that they offer, bezels and dials, I believe. So you can have something that matches. And in this case, because I like that tone of green so much, that very subtle green, it's nice to have something that matches. If you do go this route for the rubber clasp, please, please, please get it on the point clasp. That is the right way to do this. I know they make a tang buckle version and it's much cheaper, but I promise you, it's worth it to upgrade. This configuration is super comfortable. It's a rubber strap, not a whole lot to say about it. Upon buying this watch, I also bought this Milanese mesh from Steib, I believe they're called. It's really well done. It's aftermarket, but very well made. 20 millimeters all the way through, just like the OEM bracelets. And it is satinated, very substantial, about 2 millimeters in thickness all the way through. So much more substantial than even the OEM Omega mesh. At the clasp, you do have a bunch of adjustment. It does require a spring bar tool, but I'd rather have it than not. You also have this little security clasp to keep everything locked in. Now, I have tried this watch on the OEM Omega mesh, and I will say, comparing the two, I definitely prefer this. The OEM folds over just like you do with the rubber, but because it is metal mesh, it's less comfortable, more bulky. The spot where you have the excess folding over itself, it just feels like there's too much going on there. The other thing that's tough with the OEM mesh is that there are only so many holes. The degree of adjustment is just not as much as I would want. To answer your questions, yes, this is OEM. And no, this is not a direct fit. If you're really interested, all you would need is Forstner end links, a 3861 Omega bracelet, hand files, various grits of sandpaper, gigantic testicles, and a few hours of your time. But if you're willing to go the length, this bracelet does really add a certain airiness and a very pronounced taper all the way down to 15 millimeters at the clasp that changes the feel entirely. To me, this looks much more elegant, leans less tool watch and more kind of everyday, possibly, could be dressed up sort of watch. Caliber 8800 is master chronometer certified. Do I care? Not really, but it is nice that they're holding to a higher standard than most brands would at this price point. The accuracy is about as good as my most accurate watches, even watches that are much more expensive. The power reserve is fine at 55 hours, especially for a watch that you might be wearing every day, if not nearly. If you take a look at the case back, I know this is mostly machine finished, but it is still very pretty nonetheless. I have watches that are worth double, triple this that don't look any better. You can make the argument about pedigree. You can make the argument about machine versus hand finishing, but for the layperson or even just the casual watch guy, just looking at it, you're never going to be able to tell. And I do think that you will really enjoy the way this movement looks. At $5,600 at the time of purchase, this was a bargain. Nowadays, at the time of publication, MSRP is $6,700. Now that hurts, but it is still extremely hard to beat. I think in the price range of, say, $3,000, $4,000 all the way up to maybe $12,000, it is really hard to beat Omega. They kind of just crush this price range. Really, find me a better watch than this at this price. Seriously, I'm sure it exists. Find it for me. Tell me about it, because maybe I'll add it to my wish list. If you'd like to see more videos like this, let me know. And I'll see you guys next time.